Welcome to Community Forum. My name is John Gogliettino, and I'm your host. With me today is Bob Steele. He's a Connecticut business executive, former four-term congressman, I believe, in the 2nd District, and he's an author, and as well as former nominee for governor of the state of Connecticut. We're going to be having an interesting conversation about his book, and without further ado, Bob Steele, welcome to the show.
Nice to be here, John.
Yeah, you're welcome. If you could tell us a little bit about your background before we got into the highlights here. What school you went, and if you're a Connecticut resident all your life. I didn't get into that in the pre-discussions.
Well, I am. I'm a Connecticut native. I grew up in Wethersfield and went to public schools in Wethersfield. Graduated from Amherst College. Went to Columbia University, where I got a master's in government and studied at the Russian Institute there. I then was a CIA officer for about 6 years. Wow. And I ran for Congress for the first time back in 1970. I was elected. In 1974, I left Congress to run for governor, and I was unsuccessful. At that point, I left politics, and I've really been in business since that time.
Insurance business, right?
Well, insurance, banking, financial services, yeah. I actually, for the last 22 years, I've worked as vice chairman of an international consulting company that works with financial institutions and banks around the world. So I've spent a lot of the last 22 years on airplanes. As a matter of fact, we were just talking the other day. Someone was asking me if I had ever, because I spent a lot of that time in Asia, if I had ever flown that flight from Kuala Lumpur to Beijing, and I have. I've flown it at least 3 different times. So I'm certainly watching it with great sadness. What a terrible disaster.
Well, these things happen, and they say there was somebody switched off numbers, so it wasn't a malfunction on the part of the airline.
Well, as we sit here right now, it's a mystery, that's for sure.
Yeah, that's true. So, in any case, you've written a very riveting novel about casinos in Connecticut, and the evils of gambling and what have you. What got you to get into this topic? Was there anything? Was it a family situation? If you don't mind delving into that.
No, it wasn't a family situation. My family and I lived in Vernon, Connecticut for a number of years while I was in Congress. And after I left politics, we moved from Vernon down to Ledyard, Connecticut, before the casinos arrived. And those two experiences, knowing the political landscape, so to speak, as intimately as I did in eastern Connecticut, and then living in the middle of this gambling explosion, really gave me the equivalent of a front row seat for watching the political maneuverings that led to the casinos in southeastern Connecticut, and then seeing firsthand their impact. And it occurred to me as I was there that I was living through one of the most remarkable stories in the history of New England. The idea of these two Indian tribes, the Mashantucket Pequots and the Mohegans, who were once mortal enemies trying to destroy each other. And then, of course, the Mohegans and the Connecticut colonists almost destroyed the Pequots. And yet, here 350 years later, these two tribes reemerge under the law, thanks to Congress and the courts, to build these two enormous casinos. And
they became powers almost overnight. Right?
Absolutely, they became powers. And they were really the leading edge of the new explosion of casino gambling across the country. And it's an explosion that has had a major impact on Connecticut, on southeastern Connecticut, and as far as the explosion of casinos across the country, on the whole nation. And anyway, this is the book. The book is
hold it right there.
The Curse.
Right.
Big time gambling seduction of a small New England town. And it's a novel, and it's set against that gambling explosion that happened in
I think if you can hold it right over here. Yeah.
Okay. that happened in southeastern Connecticut back in the 1990s. So it's a novel set against the factual background of what actually happened in Connecticut. And I wrote it as a novel in order to try to put a human face on what's happened here in the state.
Okay, so there's the general theme is that there's too many good people that get caught up with this in this for the sake of government revenue, to try to balance our budget statewide or whatever. We've got a lot of innocent people that never had this type of shock to their system. We're New England people, and now something that was out in Vegas has been brought into this state, the bluest of states, with all of our laws, and we changed all our laws and made it easier for people to get hooked on this thing. Is that the general idea?
Well, there's no question about that, and certainly that's part of the book. I mean, there's a positive side and there's a negative side. The positive side, obviously, is that the casinos have created jobs in Connecticut. They're low-paying jobs. They're service jobs. They're becoming more low-paying all the time, but nonetheless, they're jobs. And the second thing is the casinos send 25% of their revenue to the state of Connecticut, and over the last 20 years, they've sent over $6.5 billion to the state treasury. But the downside is the casinos have created a pervasive gambling culture in southeastern Connecticut. As I say, they've sharply skewed our economy toward low-paying service jobs, and they've been followed by a huge spike in the number of pathological and problem gamblers, not just in southeastern Connecticut, but across the state of Connecticut. In fact, the state of Connecticut actually sponsored a study in 2007 to 2009, and one of the most remarkable findings of that study is that since the two casinos opened, there's been a 400% increase in the number of embezzlements in Connecticut, a rate of increase 10 times the national average. In fact, one of the embezzlers was actually my tax collector in Ledyard. She stole $302,000 in order to play the slot machines at Foxwoods, and of course she didn't win. The number of arrests for embezzlement in southeastern Connecticut has been so great that the New London Day, which is our biggest newspaper there, has described southeastern Connecticut as the embezzlement capital of America. And those embezzlements aren't just happening in southeastern Connecticut, they're happening all over the state. The most recent one was not so far north of here, up in Winchester, where according to the press, there was a $2 million embezzlement that literally brought the town almost to its knees. It was talking until Christmas about having to close the school system there. So there are enormous problems associated with it, but the saddest problems are the ones that affect individuals and their families and the people around them.
Yeah, so many families, the tragedies, because all of the paycheck goes to that, and people just can't control themselves. They're living the dream. They're following the advertising that makes it sound like, oh, join all the winners, but they don't understand for every winner there's 10 losers or more. It might be a much higher number. Somebody's got to lose the money for that one individual to win, and usually there's never a winner on these things.
I mean, think of if the state of Connecticut has taken in over $6 billion, that's 25% of what has been brought in. That means $25 billion in slot machine winnings alone. All of that money has come from losers. All of that money has come from people who've lost the money. It doesn't come from anywhere else.
That's worse than the most insidious tax.
And it is. John, you're absolutely right. Yeah. It is a tax. It's a regressive tax on lower income people. Especially hits low income people, low wage earners. It hits minorities. It hits women, and it hits retirees. People with who tend to be
they just income they can't afford to lose it. The ones that
can't afford to lose it at all.
Right.
And yet people go in the casinos and say all this bright glitter and glitz, etc.
It makes me feel good. Yeah, you go there, you lose your paycheck, and you're not feeling good that long. It's a temporary high, just like heroin, right? I wouldn't.
Wouldn't go
that far, maybe, but yeah.
Well, gambling addiction now, according to the psychiatrists, is an addiction in exactly the same class as drug addiction, alcohol addiction, gambling addiction. They're all the same, forces at work in your brain and your chemistry. So, and one of the sad things is really increasingly the most addicted people in this country are our politicians. Not necessarily addicted to
gambling
playing
itself.
themselves,
Yeah.
but to the money that's coming in, all that money. And what they don't understand is that all the new research that shows that these casinos, the cost to benefit ratio on a long-term basis is actually over 3 to 1. That is, the costs are 3 times higher than the temporary benefits. And yet what we're seeing in Connecticut is as there's more and more saturation of casinos around the Northeast, and Connecticut's casino revenue is plummeting. I mean, it's down now 34% in the last 6 years. It's down, what the amount going to the state was, at its peak was $430 million. It's down under $300 million today, and it's projected to continue to decline as Massachusetts builds 3 new mega casinos, et cetera, et cetera. And you'd think that the state of Connecticut might start saying, well, you know, now that we've got all this new information on the negative impact of casino gambling,
let's try to scale it back.
Yeah, maybe we start scaling it back. Maybe we start looking for more stable sources of revenue. Maybe we look for revenue that doesn't addict our citizens. But that's not what Connecticut's doing. Connecticut, some of our legislators have actually proposed 3 new major slots casinos, one for Windsor Locks, one for New Haven, and one for Bridgeport. And then, of course, the next step after that, we've got a number of people who want to see internet gambling here in Connecticut, including our governor, who said we should approve internet gambling for our casinos to help them defend their customer base and attract a broader audience. Well, you know, if we were to do that, if we were to legalize online gambling in Connecticut, it would be the equivalent of putting a casino
In every
house,
every household.
every apartment, and every dorm room in the state of Connecticut,
All you gotta
and every electronic device.
Right, because it doesn't take much to get on there.
No, and our young people today,
They're playing with their phones all the time as it is.
Exactly. I mean, they're technologically primed for internet gambling. Wall Street Journal reported recently that there are currently 300 tech firms at work in Silicon Valley working on gambling games for the time when internet gambling is approved across the country.
And there's still a conversation about expanding in Connecticut, thinking, well, if they don't want to go to Eastern Connecticut, maybe we should come to Western Connecticut. There's still some talk of it.
Well, one of the interesting things, you're right, one of the interesting things is, first of all, I mean, the state legislators who've approved these video slot casinos, they want to put them, as I say, in Bridgeport and New Haven. So that's
right.
Central and Western Connecticut, Fairfield County, et cetera. But in addition to that, the Obama administration now is proposing changes to the Indian gaming law, which would, and Indian federal recognition law,
right,
which would make it easier for tribes to get federal recognition. Now, I think that the economics of casino gambling are going south so fast in Connecticut that I'm not sure that they would lead to more casinos. But they certainly could lead to 3 additional tribes seeking to get federal recognition.
Especially the one down in Bridgeport that came close.
Suing landowners in order to take back land and creating tax-free zones where you could get everything from gambling to the selling of products on a tax-free basis, which would obviously hurt local merchants.
And the state. I don't know.
Well, and finally the state, and big time, absolutely.
I don't know that they got it all figured. They're just hunting for revenue. They're hunting for revenue so much so that they sometimes don't have that figured out.
There's another thing, John. Last June, you recall, and I'm sure many of your viewers will recall, that the state of Connecticut legalized Keno, which of course is electronic bingo. They wanted to put it in some 3,000 sites, convenience stores, 600 restaurants. And the idea was that when you went into a restaurant, not only would you get the menu, but now you'd get some numbers. They'd appear on a screen on the wall, and every 3 to 5 minutes you get a new set of numbers, and you could gamble through your meal as well, which I'm sure would help people's digestion a great deal.
That'd also help families,
exactly.
spend quality time and they're gambling with the stuff on the walls.
Exactly. And if you bring your kids with you,
what example is that?
They're going to want to play. So you bring your grandkids or your kids, they're going to want to know what this all about. So it would be a great way to teach your kids how to start gambling for money. Now, fortunately, there's been a lot of opposition to this. I myself have testified before the state legislature. We've got many strong opponents of Keno, and the governor finally has begun to react to all of the opposition, and he has said he would sign a repeal bill. And the legislature, the appropriate committee, has just reported out a repeal bill. So I hope that we're on the verge of repealing Keno, which again was approved but never actually not yet implemented in Connecticut.
So will that be the first time that one of these games is knocked down?
To my knowledge, it will be the first time any state in this region has actually repealed a gambling law. So that's on the plus side. On the negative side, internet gambling, the new video slots, casinos that are being proposed, et cetera. So it's a constant battle, but at least it looks like we're going to win one of them.
Oh, very good. What's happening with casinos in New York and Massachusetts? You alluded, I remember seeing in the news, there's some activity in Massachusetts. Something was passed a while back. I forget what town. I'm sure you got the goods on that. And I don't know about the New York reference that I wrote down here.
Well, that's right. We're seeing a real saturation of casinos in the country, and especially in the Northeast. When Foxwoods opened back in 1992, there were only 8 other casinos in the entire Northeast of the United States, and they were all in Atlantic City. Today, there are 57 casinos in the Northeast.
Wow.
And given the ones that are on the drawing boards, we could soon have 70. Maine now has its first 2 casinos. New Hampshire, the governor of New Hampshire is trying to open New Hampshire to casinos. Rhode Island just converted one of its 2 slot parlors into a full-scale casino. Massachusetts is in the process of picking sites for 3 new mega casinos. And you asked about New York. New York, of course, already allows extensive electronic casino-type gambling at all of its racetracks, and it also has 5 Indian casinos. But just last November, there was a referendum in New York, part of the November election, on whether or not to allow New York to build up to 7 new full-scale casinos across New York State.
Wow.
That passed, so you're going to start seeing the first new commercial casinos in New York. And as a result, I mean, that's why I referred to the fact Connecticut's revenue is down. The competition is really starting to bite in Connecticut, and it's just going to get worse and worse.
So it's not something you want to put your future on. It's something you should scale back because of all the problems it's causing. Is what you're saying.
As you and I just discussed, I mean, you would hope the state of Connecticut would say, "Look, the writing is on the wall. We can't depend on this anymore. It's a regressive tax. It's hurting our citizens. Let's start finding ways to, first of all, control our spending, and second of all, to find the right kinds of alternative solutions."
Now you mentioned internet gambling before, and I didn't get this question out while we were talking at that point in time. But I just want to revisit it. They've actually got some kind of filters that can prevent somebody, let's say in Connecticut, linking up with the gambling that's going on the internet somehow or other in another state.
Well, here's the deal. Back in 1961, Congress passed a law called the Interstate Wire Act, and it effectively prohibited internet gambling. We didn't have the internet back then, but electronic
gambling.
Right. And but in 2011, the Obama administration, the Justice Department, decided that we had been misinterpreting that law for all of these years, and that it only applies to sports betting. So immediately, states with a lot of casinos, many of the states, Nevada, for example, New Jersey, Delaware, they said, well, this opens the door to states approving online gambling within their own boundaries, within their own states. And those 3 states have now legalized it for their casinos. On the federal level, there is an effort to legalize it for all states, but there's also a strong opposition to doing that. And interestingly, this subject gets more and more complex all the time because one of the leaders of the opposition is one of the big gambling moguls in the United States, Sheldon Adelson. And so the national casino industry is now split. The opponents are saying, look, internet gambling would actually hurt casinos, and it would be toxic for young people, and it would create an enormous backlash against the casino industry. The other part of the casino industry is saying, no, that's not the case. We are hurting. Our revenues are down. We need to expand our business. We need to get to these younger people. We need a younger audience. We should approve it. So there's a big battle going on in Washington right now.
So I can see what some of them are saying, because if they're also in the hotel business and they have meals that go with the hotels, you're basically chomping maybe half of their revenue. And I can see where half of them would say, all the add-ons are going to be gone, and it's just whoever gambles that day that you're going to make any money. And I think it's more from the add-ons. So I can see that argument.
The add-ons actually, for example, our casinos in Connecticut, they get over 80% of their revenue is from the actual gambling games. The rest of it, the restaurants, the hotels, is well under 20%.
Oh, is it?
Which is interesting. But the big thing that the gambling industry opponents are concerned about is that as more and more young people get hooked on gambling, if there's internet gambling, that there will be a major backlash in America against legalized gambling, just as there was against cigarettes, for example.
Right.
And that's exactly what the gambling industry doesn't want. They don't want to have to put up signs everywhere in the casino. This is ruinous to your health, obviously, nor do they want more regulation that would stop them from expanding.
Yeah, and there definitely would be a backlash for some kind of legislation. Now, you've been going around on your tour. Give us a little bit about what you've been encountering on your tour. How are people taking the message?
Well, first of all, again, the book I wrote as a novel. And I wrote it as a novel to, as I say, try to put a human face on what has happened here. People love a story, and I try to write an exciting story against the background, the factual background of what actually happened here. And so I've been on an author's tour of New England on the novel and on the subject of casino gambling. And I've spoken at about probably 165, 170 locations across New England. The book has gotten a wonderful reception for this. I appreciate your interviewing me about it, and I'm going to continue doing that. I mean, I'm speaking 4, 5, 6 times a week, and I expect to continue doing that through the rest of this year.
And is there a good reception? What I'm saying is, what kind of feedback are you getting?
One of the interesting things is for me, when I finished the book, I did an enormous amount of research on the book. And indeed, there's even a bibliography in the back of the book, which is unusual, obviously, for a novel. But I wanted to emphasize the factual background that this story, fictional story, is set against. And I thought when I finished the book that I really knew the subject backwards and forwards. But as I've spoken, the number of people who will come up to me afterwards, not in every time I speak, but at least half the times, to tell me their own stories, or stories of their family, or stories about a son or a daughter,
grandson,
or a mother-in-law, or a neighbor, or an employee, or what happened to their business, etc., has really been stunning to me. I didn't expect that kind of reaction. So that the problems just under the surface are enormous.
Book number 2 coming.
Book number 2 coming. Yeah, all I need to do is stop driving around New England and have time to focus on book number 2.
Well, you take out one of those little tape recorders and tape it down, but the experiences. So, until it's all done, we're going to have more experience, not less.
Unfortunately, that's true.
Yeah, because it takes something like this has got to cycle through, and you got, as long as there's buildup going on. how are we going to stop it in New York? They're going to build those casinos, and things are going to get worse before they get better. And then there'll be some acknowledgement on the part of the government that, oh, we're really poisoning the air with this thing, and let's bury it or stick it over like it used to be in just one area, and that's it. Like Area 54 or something.
That's right. It continues to build, and the apologists have said, well, it'll seek its own level, and at some point it'll peter out. Well, by that time, obviously, the problems just continue to mount and mount and mount.
Now, is there a website where people could go just for information? That you have information on have you, comprised some information on a site someplace?
I do. I have a very active website that provides information both on the book and on the subject, and on gambling.
On the subject matter, right.
And the website's a very simple website. The website is rhsteele, STEELE.com. rhsteele.com.
Okay, very good. That's a succinct, and you'll have a little bit there on everything that you come across. The research backgrounds and the book. All right. Well, I believe we still have another minute. In summary, how far are you going to go out? Are you going to go out all over New England and into New York, or are you going to be going nationwide at some point?
Well, I have been all over New England now, and the concentration has been in Connecticut, Massachusetts, and Rhode Island, but I've been in all the New England states. I'm beginning to receive invitations from New York. I've been speaking to Rotary clubs, exchange clubs, Kiwanis clubs, libraries, historical societies, colleges. I'll be speaking on Tuesday at Quinnipiac University in Hamden. So a broad range of venues.
And then you're going to hit TV.
Yeah, well,
big TV.
I've done a number of TV interviews, but I especially appreciate the opportunity, John, to do this one.
Well, I thank you for coming on the show.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome. And I want to thank the viewers for tuning in to the Community Forum. Tune in next week, same time, same station. We'll have another interesting program. Good night for now, and we'll see you then.
And stay put because you're still.
Right. We get to sit in our chairs until the credits roll.